Hi guys, welcome to the Techly Learning. Step into today's live learning session, Beyond the Script, how Agentic workflows are transforming Microsoft 365 automation, part of our Microsoft 365 Community Conference sponsor webinar series. For the next 20 minutes, we're bringing today's learning session directly to our channels, sharing actionable insights and practical strategies you can start applying right away. Afterwards, the full learning experience, including live Q&A, continues exclusively in the Techly Learning Center. Follow the link in the comments to join us and be part of the conversation. Now for the exciting part, let's dive in.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen. Perfect. You can see my screen. Let me pull up the slide deck. All right. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about how agentic workflows are transforming Microsoft 360 automation. There are going to be a lot of discussions about guardrails, about how to guardrail and how to make sure that your AI automation is not doing what it's not supposed to do. But let me start by introducing myself. My name is Nick. I'm an automation consultant and also pre-sales engineer at ScriptRunner. ScriptRunner is Microsoft automation platform, and we will also take a look at it today. ScriptRunner enables you to do all sorts of automation. For example, script automation, orchestration automation, also agentic automation. So these are the things we're going to talk about it today. And the first one I want to discuss is what is the ceiling of your scripts, right? Where they stop working and how to fix that. After that, we're going to talk a bit about definitions. What is a workflow? What is agentic workflow? Because there are a lot of definitions of that, about that, and just to make sure we're on the same page. After that, I'm going to cover the unified stack, right? How to connect all these things and what stack I'm using for production products to implement AI for critical use cases. We're going to talk about NA10, ScriptRunner, PowerShell, M365, and other technologies. And of course, live demo, the most interesting part where I'm actually going to show things in live, right? So let's first discuss what are the three things that make your scripts and in general your automation to stop working. So the reason number one is that I call it every branch is a script, and what it means is you deliver a nice automation, let's say onboarding of a new employee, everything is working fine, but a couple of weeks later, you have a new case where, let's say you want to onboard a contractor, and the contractor doesn't need, let's say, Outlook Exchange email, right? So you create a new condition, an if statement, and it works great. But 6 months later, you have 20 different conditions, and the script becomes unreadable. Either you have one huge script that only one person knows how to use, or you have 20 different scripts for each use case that also nobody knows when to use. The second reason is the unhappy path always wins, right? So when we create automation, first of all, the MVP, right, we focus on the happy path, and happy path mostly covers 18 to 90% of the use cases. So what I mean by happy path is where the case goes as we planned it to be, right? So without any errors, without any unexpected inputs, outputs. But in reality, to 10 to 20%, it's always unhappy path. Let's say you want to provision license which is unavailable, mailbox not provisioned. There is something completely unexpected that you haven't thought of. And it's very important when you plan for those automations to always keep in mind strategy for those unexpected things, such as error handling, uh, notifying your support team, and so on. And the third reason is visibility. So there is no central visibility. Nobody can see what has been executed, right? And let's say you also have unified stack, different platforms. Everything is scattered, and nobody really have this one clear picture of what has been executed. For example, we have scheduled tasks on forgotten server. Um, no approval trail, meaning that everything is executed without anyone's approval. No policies, and as a result of it, audit and debugging becomes a difficult project. But none of this is a PowerShell or whatever scripting language you're using. This is more of orchestration problem. Now, talking about definitions and types of automations that I defined for this demo, I want to talk about three different types: scripted, orchestrated, and agentic. So the first one is scripted, and scripted is the one where you choose the steps, right? So you're the author of the script, and you decide the steps at the right time and advance all of them. So the script handles exactly what you foresaw, and when it meets something you didn't foresee, it fails by exiting. And that's most automation and most organizations today, and it's genuinely fine for a huge amount of work. The next one is orchestrated. So now you choose the path, not only the steps, and the workflow graph decides branches, retries, things running in parallel, merges, and so on. So when something breaks, it doesn't exit, but rather routes to an error branch and something sensible happens. For example, notification, sending a message to your support team. And this is workflow engine territory, and I want to mention that this is where the most of the actual value is, and it's really valuable part. And the last one is agentic. Here, the model chooses which tools to call at the runtime. It can handle intent it has never seen before. So let's say someone types a sentence nobody anticipated, and it still does something reasonable. So that's the upside. But the downside is that in that bottom row, it fails by doing something you didn't expect, you didn't allow. Not by exiting, not by routing to an error branch, but by succeeding at the wrong thing. And that's completely different failure mode from anything in columns 1 and 2. And it's why the second half of this talk, we're going to talk about guardrails and human in the loop and how to prevent these errors. So most production value sits in column 2, and column 3 is where the interesting risk lives. Both of those things are true at the same time. If you're going to do the agentic thing, this is the architecture that makes it defensible, right? So you have 4 layers, and the rule is that each layer has its job. It doesn't share with the other layers. So first one is intent. Intent is someone asks for something, a chat message, ticket, webhook, message in Teams, or even logs from another agent. Unstructured, unpredictable, human. Second one is reasoning. So reasoning is the LLM plus a set of tool definitions. So its job, and its only job in this case, is to look at the request that it received and pick which action fits, which tool fits. And that's it. In a way, it's a router with good natural language comprehension. The next one is orchestration. Here I'm mentioning NA10 workflows, but it can be any workflow engine you're using. Important here is sequencing, branching, retries, merges, approvals. This is where the plumbing lives. And the last one is execution. So execution is actual execution of your script, of your action. And one second. Script, in our case, that's a script runner running your PowerShell against Enter ID, Exchange, Active Directory, signed, and version. Now, here's a sentence I would like you to take away from the slide, and I'm going to say it twice. So the model itself, the LLM model, never touches an API directly. It only calls a script runner action. Now, once I show the demo, it will become more clear. But what we're not doing here, it's We're not giving ChatGPT or any LLM a PowerShell prompt and hoping that it does the correct thing. The model doesn't have credential, doesn't have a shell. It's more like it has a menu like in a restaurant, and it can only order things that are on the menu. And you are, as a developer, as an orchestrator, right? You wrote that menu, and yeah, that's how you make sure that everything stays secured. Right. Let's look at the demo part, and to make everything clear. So the first demo, we will talk about deterministic workflow, right? Onboarding workflow. And the second one, agentic workflow. So I'm gonna just quickly share my screen here and show you the whole setup, right? So before going to workflow, I also want to start actually with our scripting layer, because that's what on the first slide I mentioned, right? We have scripted layer, orchestration, and then agentic. So this is ScriptRunner portal. I'm going to use it for today's demonstration. And every automation starts with the script. So if you have a lot of scripts, this is your asset, right? This is how you can use them in your agentic automation. You can simply use them for your agents to execute. And here in the script section, this is Git based, right? Whenever we're working in enterprise environment, we want to make sure everything is versioned, right? And Git works perfectly for that. So this is repository that's connected to your remote Git, local Git. You can plug as many as you want. So here we have script sources, and you can plug as many sources as you want. So now this is where your scripts live. So for example, we have this, let's say, a script to create new Enter ID user, right? So if we click here, change history, this is your typical Git interface. You have your commit history. You can see the delta and so on. And of course, we provide you with more than 2,000 pre-made scripts that you can just use out of the box, right? And so this is actual script. We're not going to go deep into the script, but the cool thing here is that this script has param block. So param block is simply ask for information that the script needs in order to execute something. So for example, to onboard, to create a new entry user, you need information such as first name, last name, password, and so on. So once this is done, you have your script, and this is storage layer, right? Repository layer. You have your script, you can store them. Now you want to execute them. And to do that, we create action. So action simply defines the script that you're executing and the target where you're executing it, because you want to execute against your real production targets, such as Enter ID or Active Directory or any system, right? So in my case, I have Enter ID. The moment we click save, we have this action created. I'll navigate. So this was created automatically based on the script that we provided. This form, it has given name, last name, password, and so on, right? As you can see immediately, we have a static validation, regex validation, to make sure there are no typos. So you can only type letters. And we also have password here. And then finally department. So what I want to show you here is the first layer is approval layer. So in this case, what we could do, just simply click execute something and to create a new user. But in our case, we enable this so-called approval flow, which means that once somebody requests approval, so let me show it here. I will remove it here. Let's actually see how it works without approval first. Right. So once we click run, this action has been started, and this is your scripting part, right? You don't have to wait. So the cool thing here is you have live monitor where you can see what's happening. The moment this has been executed, we see this notification, and we come to reporting, and this is one place where you see all your past executions. This is really great for Debugging, let's say if there is an error, by the way, super simple to get notified here. Let's say you want to be notified whenever there is an error or a success event, or always, you just come to that action and enable email notifications. Because idea is that you want to set and forget, you want to create those actions, and you want to enable them to run and only come back when something needs to be fixed. And this is done super simple here. So going back to reporting, so this is great for debugging. And number one, you can just come here and see all the logs, and that will help you to fix the problem, or your support team. Secondly, this is great for compliance and audit reasons. So in a couple years, there's an audit and there are questions about security and what has been happening. This is your legal proof where you can see all the action that's been happening. And this, in a second, you will see how it helps you with the agentic automation. This is your key piece to enable those agentic automation in the production critical environment. Right, so we have seen how you can do this part, but now let's talk about workflows, because real end-to-end automation value comes from end-to-end flows. If we're talking about onboarding, you probably want, besides creating entry ID, you also want to assign some security groups, you want to provision computer, assign printers, and so on. And what we've seen in most teams is happening is they create one huge script that contains 10 other scripts, which becomes unreadable, very difficult to maintain, and nobody really understands how it works. So the way we enable this with ScriptRunner is with Workflow Engine, which is based off N8N. And so the way it works here is, as you can see, this is drag and drop interface. These are so-called nodes. And this thing is connected to your actual portal. And let's say we've created different actions, right? For this one, let's see. For this one, I have different actions. And now, once we go, we can actually, we can create those nodes, which is called ScriptRunner action. And what it does, it fetches all the actions that are present in your ScriptRunner instance, for example, new Exchange mailbox. And once you create it, right, you can connect it to different flows. What I like here, you have the merge statements, if statements, switch statements. So in a way, this is visual representation of the code, which makes it much simpler to comprehend what's happening and to orchestrate things. So once we have those workflows, so in our case, let's say we have create ID, enter ID user, we create Exchange mailbox, then we merge some information and we can send a welcome email, also report email, updating tickets in your ticketing system, such as Jira or Zendesk or ServiceNow, whatever you're using. So the thing I like here, how flexible it is. It has a lot of integrations. Let's say I want to integrate with Jira or ServiceNow. And if it doesn't, you can simply use HTTP request and send API call to the platform that you're using. Right, and the last piece of the puzzle is how do we actually start this thing? And one of the simplest one is using webhook. So we have this ScriptRunner webhook, which is basically allows you to start your workflow directly from our platform. You can also use normal webhook, right? So in that case, you decide, okay, which HTTP method activates starts your workflow. You define authentication methods and so on. Right, but in our case, let's just look at our onboarding and probably, one second. So once we hit the run button, we will see again, execution has been started here. We'll see it in live monitor, but we can also navigate here to executions and see that it's running. So in our case, once it's running, it will simply fetch our request and go to the correct flow. Now, there are several things here that I want to mention. First one is that the approvals, and that will help us to understand how agentic approval also works, is in this case, we're actually executing the things directly. But what we can do, right, there is a, so we can see there are some error logs, and then I can simply come and check the logs and fix that. But I will do that in a second. What's cool here is the this approval workflow. For example, let's say we want to make sure that somebody double checks before this action executed. What we can do is navigate to configuration, approval flow, and now we can select access groups and who is allowed to approve that. And this is your first layer of approval, how you can make sure that everything is being double checked before execution is started. And we actually can check that in a second. So this is the workflow and engine. And now the most interesting part that I actually wanted to show you is the AI tool. So everything I showed you before, just to kind of explain you the logic behind and how it starts with the single scripts, then you have your workflows. And once you have that layer, you can actually implement your agentic workflows that looks like that. So just to quickly go through that workflow, this is how it works. First of all, you have your input. So in this case, this is simple chat, right? And you can just write things directly here. But of course, in production cases, this chat can be anything. This can be your Teams chat, Slack messages, however you prefer, because this NA10 has a lot of integrations, so it will listen to your messages. The second step is guardrails. So guardrails, we're making sure here that there are no malicious intent. So in our case, we are checking for these keywords like remove, delete, drop database, right? And these keywords that are not supposed to happen. And in that case, if something goes wrong, it will simply mention that directly to your chat that there is a possible violation, and it's up to you what to do. Probably what you want to flag this user who's called this chat, or do some investigation, or however you want to proceed. In case everything is fine, this would go to pass, and then we do the actual message to the model, right? And here, if we navigate to this node, what we're doing here is, first of all, we define a model LLM, right? The brain that decides what's happening here. We have here a system prompt where you tell what are you supposed to do. In our case, this LLM prompt, what it does, it has to understand the intent of the message and match it against one of these actions. So if we come here, that's what we see here is 4 separate ScriptRunner actions: create entry ID user, remove, show entry ID user info, or add entry ID user to a group. And in case it's missing some information, it will always also send you this information back. Then you can reply to it. So maybe we can start here. Let me just clean this execution. I'm gonna restart this session so we don't see this previous execution that I've tried before. Right, so let's say we just say onboard a new user, and I'm doing on purpose very vague message because I want model to ask me clarifying questions. Right, so the first thing we see, it went to the, one second, let me just minimize this thing a little bit. So what has happened here is the first step, the chat input, it went to the guardrails. And if we navigate to this guardrail, we can actually see the input, my chat message, and the output. So we can see that any keywords that we define hasn't been triggered, and therefore it has passed successfully to the message model step. But as we can see here, nothing has been one second. Right, so we can see here that model understood that the user request, that the user wants to onboard a new user, but there are some missing parameters such as display name and password and user principal name. And this is a really interesting part because we haven't defined anything in advance. Just to show you an example, here is the script that model understood that needs to run, right? And if we click on it, we haven't defined anything here. So simply by using AI, it defined automatically by the model that this script needs display name, password, user principal name, and so on. So you have this button here where you can let the model define the parameter, which makes it super useful in real use cases. So now we can see here the message. Of course, we can make this message in more readable format, but the idea here is that we are missing some parameters. So display name, let's say, and I'm just gonna use some random name. I don't like this one. Say. So first one is display name. Second one is the password. User principal name. And what I like here is that it doesn't have to be correct. You can make typos and still it will work. Principal name. And then unique identifier. Right, so let's see if we just do it like that, what's going to happen. Again, it went through the guardrail, and again, it will reply us with that we're still missing some parameters. Right, so right, and then let me just quickly check because I'm thinking why it hasn't asked the. All right, so it's been executed. So there are two things how we can check the execution. The first layer is directly in NA10. So if we come here to executions, this is the place where we can see all the executions that happened before. This is how I debug things. And it's the real data that has been executed. So let's look at these logs, for example. So for each message that we sent, we can see directly what has been what was the input and what was the output. So the previous one, for example, the successful execution. The reason why it hasn't executed now, because I think I put a limit of 2 messages. So that's why it hasn't asked for a third message. But let's say the previous use case that I used, first, I also did the same thing. I input just, hey, could you please onboard this user without specifying any name? So, hey, I want to onboard a new user. So that was the same message, and it asked me to provide some more parameters. And in that case, I actually gave the full list of parameters at the first. So we can see here display name, password, username, and so on. And after that, the model was able to understand my request and match all the params against this script. So we can see that message model went green flow, happy path to this create entry ID user, and we created this user. So this is the first layer where you can actually see the execution. But now if you're going to ScriptRunner portal, this is where you can also see what has happened, what kind of scripts have been executed. So actually, this is the workflow that's been executed that you can see here. And if we click on this drop down, we can see which scripts were actually part of that workflow. And now this is the part that makes everything compliant and secure, is that you can actually see what scripts has been executed, and now you have full control over logs and what can be executed and what cannot be, because you have this guardrails and you also have approvals flow. So before running any script, you can also enable approval workflow. So whenever model is trying to run this script, you will have, as an admin or as an end user, you will have this approval thing popping up, and you can decide if you want to implement that. Now, in this case, I think I've only set the limit of 2 messages. That's why after the second message, it didn't want to continue. But I think the logic is clear here. But what I want to, last piece of puzzle I want to show you here is the human in the loop. So in our case, approval piece is the human in the loop. So you would actually need to come here, or you can also get notifications that something is needs to be approved. But what I like here in NA10, you also have human review node. So what human review node does is you can simply define before each next execution, you will get a message that asks you to approve or reject the execution. And the way it works, you can, first of all, you can choose the communication channel. For example, you want to communicate via Teams. In case you choose Teams, you will get a message on Teams asking you, hey, well, actually, let's take a look at this. So you would first define your credentials, of course, but then you can define here the message, right? Hey, do you approve this execution? And then you can also use, and then you would use probably something like some of these requests. Let's say, do you approve creating of new entry ID user with this params? So you make it easy for yourself to have the message where all the information that you need is directly in your Teams. And then you can click accept or reject, and then this will go then to the next node, right? So you would probably do something like if statement and define what happens if you accept it. So let's say if you accept it, would actually do this thing, or if you reject it, it would send a message to your colleague or something like that. Well, probably if you reject, it would simply go to stop the workflow execution. And so this gives you this security and compliance to implement those agentic workflows. So once you start doing the migration to production, you don't want to immediately give agents all the accesses. So what you want to do is you want to add as many layers as possible. You want to add guardrails. You want to add those human in the loops. And finally, you also want to add approvals. As you move through, you will see a lot of edge cases, new mistakes, and the system learns from it, and you will learn from that. And eventually, you can minimize the number of layers to make sure that still you don't need as much, let's say, babysitting of these workflows, but still everything is secure and can be run in production. All right, so we discussed the scripting part, right? So scripts are your assets. First, you start with scripts, you build them, robust scripts. Then you go from scripts to workflows, end-to-end workflows. You connect those scripts into use cases, into end-to-end automation. Instead of running 5 different scripts to onboard a user, you would create one workflow that does the whole onboarding. And once that's done, you can actually navigate to agentic workflows. You would let the model pick the actions, pick the scripts that you want to execute. And the best part here is everything stays in the system. You have full visibility on what has been executed. And by the way, one of the things here that I really like is you can ask your model to also output the reasoning of the choice, right? So you can ask, hey, what was the reason you picked that model, picked that action? And when you want to debug something, you would simply go to your logs here and you would see that output reasoning, and this will enable you to debug your LLM prompts. Another thing you could do is also ask your model to output confidence level. So each response has sort of confidence level that defines how confident the model is in its choice. And you can also add an if statement. If confidence level is less than 90%, then you would uh, turn that request into a ticket for your team to take a closer look at that. Right. So as a wrap up, three things to take away from this. So your scripts are not the problem; they're your assets. Agentic workflows don't replace PowerShell. They give it a dispatcher, and everything you have written stays. Second one is the model decides, but the platform constrains. So the reasoning belongs in the LLM, but permission, identity, and audit belong, let's say in our case, in ScriptRunner or the platform of your choice. And so you have to make sure to keep those things apart, and this is defensible. Start boring and stay boring. So wrap the scripts you already run, orchestrate them deterministically, and ship that. And the agentic layer is the last step, not the first step. We know that it's very exciting part to start with agentic automation, but in reality, most production use cases that succeeded started with the scripts and the boring part in the beginning. Finally, I just want to uh, let you know that we've created this white paper, The Future of Agentic Automation in Your Microsoft Ecosystems. This is based on our conversations with M360, with Microsoft professionals and across our calls. So feel free to scan this QR code and see more about that. And finally, thank you for listening. Please feel free to ask your questions or send me a message after the conversation if you want to discuss your use cases or whatever you're interested in.
All right. Thank you so much, Nick, for that amazing walkthrough. It's very insightful. Now let's open the floor for the Q&A. All right, for our first question, Nick, what stops an agent from taking a destructive action like offboarding the wrong user?
Right. So I would say the simplest thing to stop the destructive action is what I showed before, which was the guardrail. Right. The second thing would be the approval flow, where you double check the human in the loop double checks if um, the request that has been sent actually matches the thing. But I think in our case, this is kind of impossible because we're matching the params from the request directly to the script. So yeah, the whole platform, the tech stack that you chose defines how easy it is to prevent that.
Awesome. When the agent misinterprets a request, how do you debug the AI intent stage?
Right. So great question, and that's something I've seen in production use cases. So one of the ways I like is to make sure that the intent and the reasoning behind it stays in your logs, and this will help you to navigate to check in your logs what has been the reasoning behind. And by checking those logs, most of the time you will be able to see why did the model decide that this action has had to be performed instead of another one. And once you know that, it will be pretty easy to update your prompt to match the new correct way.
And how do you roll this out safely? Do you have to trust the agent with everything on day one?
Right. So in order to roll out it safely, we want to add as many guardrails and human in loops in the very beginning, just to make sure your AI agents don't touch anything without full approval, especially to critical infrastructure. And as you go through, you can even add second agent that will also act as the reviewer, right? There are different, it's super flexible, but I would say add guardrails, add human in the loops and approval flows, and this will really make it safe. And you have basically workflow execution, but under human review.
Last question for you, Nick. Which LLM does this run on? And can we use our own model or keep everything on-prem?
Right. So in my case, I used, I think it was OpenAI. It can be anything you want, right? So this is super flexible platform. Some production use cases are using uh, on-prem because of privacy reasons. So, for example, in the case where you want to make sure that your data stays in the system, you want to use on self-hosted models, right? In that sense, in that case, all the data that goes in stays on your LLM. But you can choose using, for example, OpenRouter. It's, lets you use any model of your choice. Can be Anthropic, OpenAI, Gemini, also free models. So up to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nick, for answering those questions. Before we wrap, register for the Microsoft 365 Community Conference happening May 4th through 6th in Las Vegas and save $500 with the discount code A500. Check the link in the comments to register. We really appreciate you spending your time with us, and thank you so much, Nick. We hope you find today's session valuable and provide meaningful insights and practical strategies that you can put into actions right away. Have a great day. Bye, y'all.